Alright guys, today I'm going to be talking about a franchise I briefly talked about at the end of the 2023 video, and well, that is the Scream franchise. Honestly, I haven't really got anything else to say, so let's just get right into it. Scream is a 1996 slasher film which was directed by Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson. It stars Neve Campbell, David Arquette, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, Jamie Kennedy, and Drew Barrymore. It was released on December 20th, follows high school student Sidney Prescott, played by Campbell, and her classmates in the town of Woodsboro, California, as they become targets of a killer in the Halloween costume known as Ghostface. The film is overall a satire on the cliches of the slasher genre with some references to Halloween, Friday the 13th, and even Craven's own A Nightmare on Elm Street. The plot is inspired by the real-life case of Gainesville Ripper, and is influenced by Williamson's passion for horror films. The script ironically was originally titled Scary Movie and was retitled before the filming was complete. The film actually faced some problems. It had censorship issues with Motion Picture Association of America, and they also had problems with the town locals while filmed in Vancouver. However, it still released and received positive reviews and did great in the box office, earning 173 million, which made it the highest grossing slasher film for 22 years until the release of 2018's Halloween. The movie was actually credited for revitalizing the genre in the 90s. This is a wonderful film and it is still my favourite from its genre. The cinematography and settings along with the music and sound effects really make it a brilliant directed horror film. The writing does this while also making fun of the same genre to make it even more iconic. All the actors are spot on in their roles, especially the three major leads of the franchise, which are Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette. I'd also just like to comment that usually with horror villains, they have original designs that make the character iconic. And well, this film just shows how the writing is brilliant because Ghostface was simply just, well, an easily accessible Halloween costume that has now been iconically used in many Halloween costumes because of the films. Again, this is my favourite horror film. A 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10. Scream 2 was released in 1997, was once again directed by Craven while being written by Kevin Williamson. It once again stars Campbell, Arquette, Cox and Kennedy with newcomers Sarah Michelle Gellar, Laurie Metcalf, Jerry O'Connell, Elise Neal, Timothy Olyphant, Jada Pinkett and Levi Shulber. The film was released on December 12th, less than a year after the first. In the continuity of the franchise, it is set 2 years after the first and is set in an Ohio college named Windsor, where a copycat killer is using the Ghostface disguise. Williamson provided a 5-page outline for the sequel while auctioning his original script, hoping to get a franchise going. Dimension moved forward the sequel after the first film was still in theaters after successful test screenings with cast to return and Craven to return. This sequel also faced problems, mostly about complaints about its plot after information leaked on the internet revealing the identity of the killers. The film also had a rushed schedule where the script was written often. Once again though, this film did well in the box office, making 172.4 million, only around 700,000 less than the first, and again got positive reviews, where even some critics argue that it was better than the first. Like all sequels, this is obviously a cash grab, but of course, like the first movie, it knew exactly what it was. As mentioned in the film, the only good sequels back then were films like Aliens and The Godfather Part 2, but for this film I would say it is still very clever, but not as brilliant as the first. Pretty much the only problem of doing everything again was that pretty much the killings were the same. The only thing that pretty much got me when I first watched this film was when Randy got chucked into the news van. However, I could say this film decided to be a lot more gory than the first. Pretty much every dead body was as bloody as stews at the end of the first film. Since the first knew it was a horror movie making fun of other horror movies, the story this time shows ironies within horror sequels, within ironies here. Overall, these films can't really be critiqued about doing horror tropes because, well, it knows exactly what it's doing. A thing I also liked about the sequels that, yet again, it was very hard to find out who the killers were. Using Billy's mum as an undercover reporter was genius, and also Derek was kind of a cooler Randy, which I didn't really like, but it was very smart for him to just lay low in the action until the big reveal. Overall, it's very clear that the Scream sequels want to ask the question, does this media make you act violently? Well, that's for you to decide really, so yeah, I'm going to give this film a 3.5 out of 5 or a 7 out of 10. Scream 3 is a 2000 film directed again by Craven, but this time written by Aaron Coulger. Campbell, Arquette and Cox returned while Parker Posey, Patrick Dempsey, Scott Foley, Lane Henriksen, Matt Kelser, Jenny McCarthy, Emily Portmer, Dion Richmond and Patrick Warburton joined the cast. This film was also intended to be the concluding chapter to a trilogy, until well 11 years later when the fourth released. The film takes place 3 years after the second and follows Sydney, who has now gone into self-imposed isolation following events of the first two films. But she must go to Hollywood after Ghostface begins killing the cast of Stab 3, which is a part of a fictional series which was inspired by the prior events mentioned. Also mentioned, the first two was satire to the genre it's in, but this one decided to take more a lot of the comedic elements with the horror violence being dialed down due to public discussion whether media was actually causing real-life violent events. The reason Williamson could return was because he already made prior commitments to other projects, and he didn't have the time to complete a full script for this film. However, he did leave notes for where the film could go, but Kruger decided to ignore these for some reason. This meant again production had troubles with the script rewrites, and even then, there were a fair few scheduling difficulties involving the cast. The film overall took place from July to September 1999, and the ending was even refilmed in January 2000. The film premiered on February 3rd in Westwood, LA, and was theatrically released the next day, making $162 million on a $40 million budget. However, this received mixed reviews, which cited it the weakest installment in the series. An offense I gave to Scream 2 is that essentially they knew what they were doing with a cash grab, and just carried on making fun of what horror sequels do. However, there comes to a point where you think, are they still trying to make fun of it, or are they just doing it for the sake of it? And here is where I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to say the overall plot and overuse of characters made me question this. This time, we are all of a sudden in a Hollywood where a Ghostface is killing the cast members of the undergoing Stab 3. Overall, again, they did just want to make fun of horror movies inside of a horror movie. I didn't really like where they took the main characters in between the time of Scream 2 in this film as well. Dewey, instead of being the pure cop we all know, is now a guy using his fame to create this new fictional film. Also, why is he and Gale not like they were at the end of the last sequel? They're just fighting again with the actress who plays the fictional Gale being involved. They also could have been together straight away in this one, but they just decided, oh, we haven't really got anything to go with these characters, so let's just make them argue once again. However, at least they tried to do something with these two in this film, because Cindy is just full on autopilot here. She just wants to be involved because of her mother's murder, and that is pretty much it. I even mentioned before how Scream 2 had gone a lot more gory in the first, but this one just seemed to have been toned down, that we don't even have that much blood until the murderer of our murderer. I think honestly they should have just left it here. It seemed they had no ideas after, and hey, this was said to be intended to be a original trilogy, but hey, we got a number 4 11 years later. I give this one a 3 out of 5 or a 6 out of 10. Scream 4, as briefly mentioned, is a 2011 film directed by Craven with Williamson returning to write. Returning cast members are Campbell, Acquet and Cox, with Emma Roberts, Hayden Panettiere, Anthony Henderson, Alison Brie, Adam Brody, Rory Culkin, Mariella Jaffe, Eric Hudson, Mary McDonnell, Mary Shelton, Nico Torella joining the cast. The film takes place on the 15th anniversary of the original murder and also involves Sydney returning to Woodsboro 10 years later, where Ghostface once again kills local high school students. Along with the typical jokes of the previous film, this one also adds commentary on social media and internet fame. This one was actually confirmed to be in development in June 2008, with Campbell, Acquet and Cox announced to be returning in September 2009. Craven was confirmed to return in March 2010, with casting lasting between April and September of that year. Filming began in June and ended around September, which took place in Michigan. During the production, Kruger was actually hired to do the script rewrites, and reshoots were filmed in early 2011 after test screenings. The film premiered at the TCL Chinese Theatre in LA on April 11th and was released in the US on April 15th. It was overall praised for its performances, direction, humour, but would be criticised for its lack of scares and reliance on the cliché formulas. Although many believed it was still better than 3. The film made $97 million on a $40 million budget. This was the final film to be directed by Craven before his death in 2015. It was followed by a TV show with the same title, which was developed by MTV. However, it had no involvement from the main cast or crew. Heck, they didn't even use the original mask and voice from Reggie L. Jackson until the 3rd season. These reasons, and also the one where it's now not really canon to the movies, is why I won't be talking about it fully in this video. Honestly, I don't want to be a dick because these two pretty much worked on all the Screams, but I just don't want to blame Wes Craven here. He made this film very much like the same style as the original ones, but in a more modern standards. I do think, however, Kevin Williamson lost his original touch after writing the first 2 films, especially 10 plus years later. Something I found rewatching this film is that, well, it had a very fast ending. In the first part it is decently paced, but as soon as the Stabathon scene took place, it just full on went into the ending, with some slow-ass scenes in between with the new teenagers. I'd say this is a little better than number 3, but still is just bad. Another 3 out of 5 or a 6 out of 10 to me. This Scream is a 2022 film this time, directed by Matt Beltrami and Tyler Gillett, while being written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick. The overall film is dedicated to Craven. The film stars Melissa Barrier, Kyle Garner, Mason Goodin, Mikey Madison, Dylan Minnette, Jenna Ortega, Jack Quaid, Jasmine Savory Brown, and Sonia Amar, with Matazzo, Jackson, Shelton, Ulrich, Cox, Acquette, and Campbell returning. This film takes place 25 years after the original murders, when yet again a Ghostface starts to target a group of teenagers who are linked to the original killings. This film satires everything that they satired in the previous films, but with reboots, legacy sequels, and the overall subject of fandoms also being joked about this time. Originally, a 5th and 6th Scream was discussed after the original release of the 4th in 2011. However, Craven and Williamson had doubts about doing so after the 4th was released to make money out of the whole series. Even then, in 2017, the Weinstein Company, which owned these films, closed down due to allegations against the owner, Harvey Weinstein. However, the franchise ended up being obtained by Spyglass Media Group in November 2019, and they confirmed a new film would be made. Next year, Williamson, who returned as an executive producer, confirmed that this film would not be a reboot and confirmed that Olpen and Gillett were hired to be directors in March 2020. Campbell and Arquette were confirmed to be returning later on in the month, with Cox and the new cast members joining the project in the middle of the year. Production was delayed due to COVID, and filming took place between September and November of 2020 in North Carolina. To overall avoid plot leaks, numerous versions of the script were produced, and several additional scenes were filmed. This was released in the US on January 14th and made $140 million. It was praised by critics for honouring Craven's legacy and for having a thoughtful meta-commentary on horror films, with some calling it the best Scream sequel. This movie is brilliant. You can tell by the entire team understood what made the original Scream and how modern horror really is. Gonna be honest, I think this is the most brutal Scream film we've ever seen yet. Pretty much every joke lands, making fun of the new era of horror, Gen Z, horror/movie fans, and even their own franchise. I'd say one disappointment though was one of the ghost faces. However, the other one was definitely great and even was my favourite character of the whole film. Would generally say they could have used some of the newer cast more, however this isn't quite to blame on our legacy characters who are used to the perfect amount. Overall, this is just as good as the original. This is another 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10 from the franchise. So yeah guys, that was me covering the Scream franchise, and I can't wait to see what we'll get from number 6 and possibly 7, because they pretty much confirmed 7 will happen if 6 is good enough. So yeah, obviously you had the problems with production that I mentioned in the 2023 video, but I think everything will be fine, and we'll hopefully get another 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10, it depends how you rate it to be honest. But yeah, this is a franchise I've been in love with since a kid. Maybe I shouldn't be in love with it since I was a kid, but I still love it now. So yeah, I haven't really got anything to say other than if you liked the video, please like, comment down below your own thoughts of the Scream franchise, and your thoughts on whether number 6 is going to be any good. And also subscribe if you've been watching the videos for a while now. So yeah, I'll see you for next week with whatever I cover.
Scream, rated R restricted from Dimension Home Video, coming soon to Blockbuster.